Hey y'all! When I first started my transition from tent camping to learning hammock camping, I had a lot of questions. It was like, how to go about doing things, where to put my stuff, things like that. And I figured that the best way to roll that out for beginners might be to just show my routine and what I do when I get to camp. So now that I've got a couple through hikes under my belt with a hammock, I've got a pretty well settled routine. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. First, I want to start by showing how I have my hammock set up for organization. I have a PeakShelf on each end of my hammock. On the head end, I keep stuff that I'll need during the night, like my down booties and stuff like that. And on the foot end, I keep things that I won't need till the morning. And then I also have a Ridgeline organizer where I keep hot hands, my medications, little things like that. So my routine starts pretty much like anybody else's routine. I get to camp and I start looking for a place to set up. Once I've found my place and I've paced my trees, and I pace the trees so I get an idea of how high I need to hang those straps on the trees, because the wider apart the trees are, the higher those straps are going to have to be. Once I've done that and checked overhead to make sure there's no widowmakers, I go ahead and I start getting ready to set up. So first thing out of my pack is going to be those hammock straps and the line for my tarp. And I keep those on the outside of my pack because a lot of times in the morning when I take them off of a tree, they can be wet and also they can be dirty and sappy. So I don't want that inside my pack with my other stuff. I do have a memory item here for these straps, and we'll talk about that later. So once the hammock straps and the tarp lines are around the tree, first thing I put up is my hammock. And I do this first because it helps later on with getting the tarp centered. So that way you're not doing the tarp, then the hammock goes up. Now you're trying to move the tarp over the hammock. It goes a lot faster if you put the hammock up first and then the tarp. Now, obviously, if it's raining, I'm going to want to put that tarp up first because that's going to help protect me in the hammock while I'm setting that up. So if I have my Dream Hammock Darien with me that's got the underquilt attached to the bottom, I use an anaconda sleeve to hold that underquilt in place under the hammock. But if I have my Hellbender with me, I don't need the anaconda because the underquilt is sewn to the hammock. So once the hammock is up, then I put up my tarp with it still inside a snakeskin. And if it's going to be nice weather, I just leave it in the snakeskin so that way I can fall asleep looking up at the stars. But it's in place so that if things change, I can get that thing deployed in a hot minute. But if it's going to be weather or cold, another thing to consider, even if the weather is nice, there could be a lot of dew in the morning. So that tarp's also going to protect you from that. So if it's going to be conditions like that, I'll go ahead and get that tarp set up now and staked down. My favorite way to rig my tarp is Porch Mode, because that way I can lay in the hammock and have a nice view of the nature around me. Shug has a really good video on how to rig tarps, and he does go over how to do Porch Mode, and I'm just going to go ahead and link that in the description below. The reason I've selected a camouflage tarp is because when I'm out there solo, it just makes my campsite look a little more masculine, and also it helps me blend in better if I'm stealth camping. So next I unload my pack, and I'm going to take the things out of it that I'm going to need at camp or I'm going to need in the hammock. And then after I'm done with that, I take that pack and I hang it off the hammock suspension. The reason I don't hang my pack from a tree like a lot of people do is because I don't want rodents or raccoons or field mice or anything like that to chew holes in my pack, because they will chew a hole in a pack even if the top is left open. And also when it's hanging from the suspension, it's sheltered under the tarp. So rodents, they love to chew stuff up. So I always make sure to put my hiking poles somewhere where the handles are not leaning up against a tree or laying on the ground, because of the sweat from our hands and everything on that cork. They will chew the living crap out of that cork. So don't leave those laying on the ground. So ladies, this one's for you guys. Your pea rag or kula cloth or whatever you use, I use that and I hang it on the outside of my hammock, and that's just for those late night nature calls. So that way it's just right there ready to go. So once I'm all settled into my hammock, I'll use this cork trigger point ball. and I roll out the bottoms of my feet with it, and it feels so good, y'all. If you don't have one of these, get one. It's about the size of a golf ball and doesn't weigh much. As I change into my sleep clothes, I take my hiking clothes and I put them in my stuffed sack pillow. Now, my stuffed sack pillow is this. It's made of DCF, but it's got a side on it that's a soft velvet, and that's for your face to go against. So that way you don't wake up in the morning and have your drooly face all glued to this DCF. So, and it's also just really comfortable. This one is from Hyperlight Mountain Gear, but I know Z-Packs makes one as well. Definitely well worth it, and it weighs hardly anything. And then it's time to change my clothes. And while I do that, I also take that time to have myself a little wet wipe bath and some witch hazel wipes for my face. And I keep those things stored in the Ridgeline organizer, just in some little Ziploc bags. A lot of people will use a Tyvek ground sheet to put under their hammock so that they can set their stuff on it. I really found that I don't really have a need for that. So when I'm in my hammock, I just have my camp shoes sitting right on the ground next to me, like slippers next to a bed. I mean, they're shoes, right? So once I get out of my shoes, I also will take them and I tie the shoelaces together and hang them over my hammock suspension, kind of like sneakers over a power line. So that way they're not sitting on the ground and having spiders or whatever get inside. And also so that I can reach them in the morning without even having to get out of the hammock. So last but not least, I finally take my top quilt out of the pack and throw it in the hammock, and so it can start lofting up. The reason I wait till the end to do this is just so it's not in my way while I'm trying to get dressed and cleaned up. I also, while it's still light out, I find my headlamp and I just put that around my neck because I don't want to be searching around for it later. And another thing that I do before it gets dark is I go and I find a tree and I put my hang line over it. It's for my food bag later, so that way I'm not trying to get that done in the dark. Oh, and fun tip, if you offer to let somebody else hang their bag with yours in the morning, they'll come bring you your bag and the hang line. So for lighting inside my hammock, I just have a string of those cheap fairy lights and I just wrap it around the ridgeline so that way it's just right there overhead and it doesn't weigh hardly anything. So when it's getting close to time to go to bed and I'm done eating dinner, I make myself a hot apple cider, and I may or may not put a little whiskey in it. But the reason I do this is because, well, number one, it's tasty, but also the temperature of it helps warm me up, and also the sugar content helps me stay warmer through the night. So, and then also, I take so long piddling around when I get into my hammock and squishing and squirming around that it also tends to warm me up. If you're not a squirmer and piddler, then you could like run in place or do some jumping jacks and then hop in the hammock, and that'll start to warm things up for you really quick. I also take one little hot hand packet and I throw it down into the bottom of the hammock. So that way it's also helping to add some heat to that underquilt. One other thing I do before I go to bed is I leave myself a water bottle and my alcohol stove sitting upright outside the hammock, and that's so I can make my coffee in the morning. But if it's going to be freezing temperatures, I'm going to have that bottle of water inside with me, and I'm also going to have my electronics and my water filter and stuff like that with me so it doesn't get frozen. And I've mentioned this before on a different video that if your water filter freezes, the little capillaries inside can burst, and then you'll still have water going through, but it's no longer filtering. In the morning, when my alarm goes off, I grumble a little, and then I get my coffee water going. So while that's heating, I go ahead and get my top half of my clothing changed, and that's just to kind of take advantage of the warmth that's coming off the stove. Then I sit back and I relax while I drink my coffee and just watch and listen as the forest comes awake. And it really is, that's one of my favorite times backpacking is just, there's a lot of favorite times backpacking, but that's one of them, is to just sit back and relax and just be with nature. Once my coffee's all gone, I change the bottom part of my clothes, get my shoes put on, and I take my pack down, and I have any other little knickknacks and stuff that are inside the hammock that I'm not going to pack away with the hammock. I get those all put into the backpack, and everything else goes pretty quick from there. I take down my tarp, but if it's raining, the tarp will be the very last thing to come down, so I can get everything taken down and packed up under the dry shelter of that tarp. And if I do have a wet tarp, once everything's inside the pack and it's closed, then I take that tarp down, I roll it up, and I lash it to the outside of my pack on the top. So that way I'm not taking that wet hammock and putting it inside my pack with the things I want to keep dry. So because my tarp is DCF and that fabric can be a little bit finicky when it's stored, I roll my tarp. But if you have a nylon tarp or sil nylon or something like that, you don't need to worry about that. Once the tarp is down, I put my hammock inside the Anaconda, and again, I don't need to do that with the Hellbender. So once I have the Anaconda on, it's time to pack away the hammock. And since I only use my sleep clothes when I have the hammock up, I just leave those things in there along with other stuff I'm going to use inside the hammock, like my down booties and that cork ball. The reason that I don't put my hammock and everything inside of a stuff sack is because I think it packs better when it's not in a stuff sack, because I can shove that thing into my pack and it takes up the space of all those little nooks and crannies and just fits better. So remember I had talked about a memory item with my tree straps? This is Pack Rat. Pack Rat. Pack Rat goes everywhere I go. In the outside mesh pouch of my backpack, is where I put my tree straps. And then Pack Rat sits on top of the tree straps. So if I go to put Pack Rat in there and he doesn't have anything to sit on, I have forgotten my straps. And y'all, seriously, this is one of my biggest fears with hammocking, is to get to camp and realize that I have left my straps hanging on the trees miles back. So I have this memory item when I put Pack Rat in there. If he doesn't have straps to sit on, I have forgotten them and I need to grab them. So once I have my tree straps, it's time to get my pack on and I'm off. I kind of made this sound like a lot because I talked about a lot of details, but it's really not that much. I don't want to make hammocking sound like it's very complicated because it's actually very simple. So that's my routine. If those of you watching this have any tips that you think might be helpful to beginners who are watching this video, go ahead and put those in the comments. And beginners, don't forget to go into the comments and see what the other experienced hammockers have to say. Also, I am almost to 1,000 subscribers. So if you guys like the content that I'm putting out, don't forget to subscribe. Other than that, that's all I got. So I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye. And that's going to be things like my sleep clothes. I totally fucked that up. Because it just takes and it squishes. There's a fly stuck under my sleeve.